Yeah, that was an ugly one. Honestly, just a bad day for Seattle sports all around. And for the Kraken especially, a game that you'd really just like to put in the past and completely forget about. But yeah, we gotta go over it, so let's get this over with. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Kraken play their first of what will hopefully be a rare few games this season, where they looked a lot like the team that we saw, especially early on last year. Yeah, and it just doesn't go well against the Vegas Golden Knights as they lose 5-2, and that final score makes it look closer than it was. Lineup ice for the Kraken, another couple of, I guess, unexpected decisions, at least based on what I said in the last one. They go with a similar lineup to what they had against the Kings, which I guess worked well there, so maybe they figured why not just stick with it. So it's once again Jones in net, and once again Shane Wright scratched from the lineup. As far as Wright is concerned, they've said that they have a pretty specific plan with him that they've discussed with him ahead of time, so at least it probably wasn't a surprise for him. Still, I'm not sure he was terribly excited to be in a suit on the bench when they announced the lineup for the team, and would have certainly liked to be out on the ice, especially with his family in town to hopefully watch him play. As far as Jones, again, he had a good night against the Kings, but his track record against the Vegas Golden Knights, which goes back to his time with the Sharks, as Sharks fans well know, is not a particularly stellar one. And sure, yes, Vegas' lineup is considerably different now than it was 2 years ago the last time Jones faced them, largely due to the fact that Vegas goes through their players and moves on from players faster than, well, faster than it seems like they have time to call all of those players about it when they move on from them. But still, it's the type of matchup you might want to think about before just throwing him out there against them. I guess as far as Sharks fans are concerned, it maybe was kind of neat to see the matchup of their two old goaltenders, as Aiden Hill, their goaltender from last year, was in net for the Golden Knights. Either way, though, and honestly, it wouldn't have mattered regardless of who the Kraken put out on the ice, in net or otherwise, and even in spite of a pretty cool opening ceremonies that they did, again for the home opener of a brand new season, the crowd for the Kraken was, well, let's just say they definitely had some wind taken out of their sails before the puck even drops. And that's because just before the puck does drop, news was starting to spread around the crowd that the Mariners had finally lost their, well, what would turn out to be the final game of their season as they get swept by the Astros, losing the final one in 18 innings, 1-0. So, yeah, a bit depressing there. Although it has to be said for the Mariners, well, it took them almost 6 hours to give up their first point to the Astros. For the Kraken, once puck drops, it took them just 12 seconds. Vegas would win the opening faceoff, which would become a bit of a theme over the course of the night as they would end up winning 46 faceoffs to just 24-1 for Seattle. So yeah, just about a 65 win percentage at the dot for Vegas, which is a big problem for the Kraken. And sure enough, the puck ends up in the Kraken zone pretty quickly along the boards where Gord loses a puck battle, and just like that, it's a 2-on-1, or depending on how you look at it, maybe even a 2-on-0, because, well, Borgen, one of the two defensemen, has been beat completely. Soucy is still, depending on how you look at it, between the Vegas Golden Knights and the goal, although he's kind of just drifted way off to the side, not really blocking any potential shots, or for sure not a potential pass. And that's exactly what happens as the puck gets passed from the side, out in front, and ends up in the back of the goal before Soucy can get back in position. He almost gets a piece of it, and I think Jones might have somehow gotten a little piece of it. Either way, it's 1-0 Vegas 12 seconds in. A few minutes later, with Seattle still playing sloppy and honestly looking completely devoid of energy or really even a desire to be playing this game in the first place, which, especially considering that's a polar opposite of how they played the first two games on the road, really only makes sense if they're all, I guess, diehard Mariners fans and are just depressed again like the rest of us about how that game ended. I mean, I guess to be fair to Tanev, he does have that picture of wearing a Mariners hat as a kid, so maybe he is, but I don't think the rest of them can really use that as an excuse. Either way, they find themselves on the penalty kill just a few minutes later, and Vegas already has that 1-0 lead. And while the penalty kill does a decent job of killing it off at first for the first minute or so, eventually, as they get back into the zone, once again, 3 Vegas Golden Knights find their way behind all of the Kraken players except for Soucy, which did include Borgen again. Really not a great game for Borgen, especially here early on. And while this time Susie is actually in a position to do something about it, it's a 3-on-1, and that's never going to go well, especially when you have the forward talent that Vegas has, not to mention being on a power play. And sure enough, although there is an attempt to stop it, and Susie tries to get his stick down on the ice to stop the pass gets through from one side to the other and into the back of the wide open net. Somehow Jones did actually manage to get his stick back in time to get at least a piece of it, but it still goes into the net, and Vegas has an early now 2-0 lead. And so again, while we could talk all we want about the fact, like I mentioned in the beginning, that Jones does not have the best track record against the Golden Knights, and yes, it is now 2-0 less than 4 minutes into the game, I think it's pretty much impossible to put either one of these goals on Jones. He was just left completely out to dry by really his entire team. The only guy you can even say that has made an attempt at this point would be Carson Soucy, and again, on the first one, that was a pretty half-hearted attempt at that. Yes, by the end of the first period, the Kraken do have more shots on goal than the Vegas Golden Knights, leading there 12-9. But again, the quality of those shots is drastically different. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if all 9 of those Vegas shots came on odd man breakaways, as it was pretty much a constant breakaway after breakaway train going towards the Kraken end of the ice. And also, to be fair, there's a number of those breakaways where the shots just straight up missed the net. So while the shots on goal might not look all that bad with just 9 in a period, it was pretty ugly in that first period pretty much the entire way through. Meanwhile, the 12 shots that the Kraken get, sure, they're shots on goal, which we like to see, but there really wasn't any that tested Hill in net for Vegas all that much. And then this, again, similar to the start of last season theme of the Kraken giving up odd man rush after odd man rush and grade A scoring chance after grade A scoring chance the other way, while getting shots on goal but not great scoring chances of their own at the other end of the ice, pretty much just continues into the second period, where it was still very sloppy from Seattle. And eventually, those odd man rushes and that sloppy play leads to a penalty shot awarded to Vegas after a breakaway leads to a hooking call, and that penalty shot, which fortunately Jones is able to make the save on to once again bail out the Kraken with yet another grade A save from him. However, not long after, with some more sloppy play, Seattle, and actually this one comes off of another breakaway that's a penalty that ends up stopping it, but this one turns into a 2-minute minor, and Vegas makes quick work of it. It does turn out to be a bit of more of an unfortunate, just bad luck bounce for the Kraken this time than just terrible defense that allows this one in, as Stone tries to shovel a puck that's out in front of the crease just into the 5-hole of Jones, trying to slam it into his pads. But Alexiak gets his stick on it, which takes the puck off of Stone's sticks. So, a decent defensive play by Alexiak. Unfortunately, the puck bounces off of their 2 colliding sticks, and through Alexiak's legs, it just kind of slides out into open ice, right out into the slot, where the only guy there that can get to it is Riley Smith for the Golden Knights, and he puts it into the side of the net before Jones can correct and get back there. And it's 3-0 Vegas. And once again, to this point, none of these 3 goals are really on Jones, so when at the end of the game Hackstall said that Jones gave them a chance to win, although it's 3-0 at the back half of the second, it's kind of hard to argue with him because he's made more big saves than ones he's allowed in, and the ones that he's allowed in would have been absolute highlight reel saves for him to make in the first place. However, goals 4 and 5 that come before the end of the second period, a little bit less so. Goal 4 comes from a right along the goal line impossible angle shot from Marchessault that he's just kind of putting on net, hoping for a rebound or, I don't know, something good to happen. And, well, for him, something good does happen as Jones leaves a little bit too much of a gap for him to shoot at, and it ends up going through Jones' armpit, off of his side, and into the net. Definitely a soft goal and one Jones would like to have back. And then as we finally close into the end of the second period, the Kraken finally really get the first good shift of the game where they're able to get sustained pressure and a number of good chances and shots off on goal. It's of course the Beniers line that's creating that pressure, but as that pressure comes to an end and the Beniers line goes off for a change, Vegas gets another breakaway coming back the other way, and eventually with just over 15 seconds left in the second period, Shea Theodore from way up by the blue line right down the middle just takes a shot, because what the heck, there's just a few seconds left, maybe you get a rebound. But no, he's not going to need a rebound as it goes clean through Jones and into the back of the net. I don't even know if he gets a piece of this one. It's one that, again, came from the outside, and he had a perfectly clean look at. So, yeah, second goal that he definitely want back. And now it's completely out of reach at 5-0 as we go into the end of the second. Coming into the third, Grubauer is in net for the Kraken. Jones gets pulled. Again, the first three, not on him at all, but the second two, yeah, definitely on Jones there. But, if you go down 3-0 and leave him hanging as often as they did, it's hard to really put this game on Jones, even though those last two were pretty ugly. And speaking of ugly, the start of the third period continued to be ugly for the Kraken, as Grubauer himself had to make a couple of pretty big saves to keep this from becoming 6 or maybe even 7-0 early on in the third. Eventually, as we get into the last 10 minutes of the game, this is where the Kraken were finally able to get things calmed down and start to turn the game in their favor. Finally able to get a puck to bounce their way, which creates a breakout chance going the other way and an odd man chance, as Burakovsky really creates this odd man chance as Schultz, of all people, the new defenseman, finds his way behind the Vegas defense and gets the first real dangerous look on the Vegas net, which he's able to make count, getting into the net and at least breaking up the shutout. And also gets his first of the season and first in a Kraken uniform, which now means that every one of the free agent additions for the Kraken, or at least the ones that have played for them so far, have a goal. I mean, except for Jones, but if Jones had a goal, that would be pretty newsworthy, so all the skaters at the very least. Although it wasn't the case early on when they first initially announced the goal, just a little bit later, Beniers does get a secondary assist added onto this. It's a bit of a fortunate secondary assist, if we're being honest, as the fortunate bounce that the Kraken got that allowed this breakout to happen in the first place was a Vegas player trying to center the puck from behind the corner behind the Kraken net, but it goes off of Beniers' skates to Burakovsky, who's able to skate it up and make the play happen. Still, I guess technically speaking, Beniers was in the right place to get in the way at least, and yeah, sometimes that's just how you get assists, is a fortunate bounce. And although even with this goal, it does still look pretty ugly on the scoreboard at this point in the game, largely because, again, the Kraken decided to pretty much not play the first 50 minutes of it, the crowd is still trying to have some fun with it, and chants start up of we want more after this first goal, which, funny enough, they end up getting as the Kraken get a second power play in the game here late in the third, just a couple minutes after the first goal. And this power play looks a lot more like the power play that we've come to expect now over these first few games of the season. They get a couple of good chances, and eventually one goes in. It's a beautiful pass from Burakovsky to the far side of the net, where Schwartz is waiting just on the other side of the crease to tip it in off of his stick. Honestly, a good shot by Burakovsky that he just banks off of Schwartz's stick. And while Hill isn't able to catch the puck on its way in, he does catch Schwartz afterwards and gives him a nice big hug and just kind of a awkward embrace in front of the net as Pietrangelo pushed Schwartz into Hill, but not too much extracurriculars after that. Still, the Kraken get a second goal, and for the first time this season, we have a Kraken player with 2 goals on the season. Schwartz gets there first after 9 players had all scored their first goal. At which point, the fans that had been chanting, "We want more," update their chant to "We got 2," which, again, at least they're having fun with a pretty ugly night of hockey from the Kraken, where, although Vegas does end up getting another power play, this one's killed off really well by the Kraken, and the game ends still 5-0 Vegas wins. So yeah, pretty ugly. As for the Kraken 3 stars in this one, I think I could be justified in saying that nobody deserved a star. But considering they at least tried in the last 10 minutes, and there were a couple of guys that, in spite of how the rest of the team looked, seemed like they were at least giving an effort out there on the ice in those first 50 minutes. So I'm going to give those 2 guys that I felt that way about stars 1 and 2. Star number 1 will go to Adam Larsson, who was pretty much the only player that really stood out, certainly at least defensively. Larsson seemed like the only one really putting out that much of an effort in this one. A lot of big hits along the boards and denying Vegas at least the ability to move the puck down his side of the ice when he was out there. Unfortunately, he's only out there for a third of the time, and that became a problem, but still. And the second, and really other than Jones, only other guy that I felt like put a noticeable positive effort out there in those first 50 minutes was Oliver Bjorkstrand, who had probably the only good chances on net that the Kraken had in the first 2 periods at the very least. Still, it wasn't enough to get him on the board or really even create a grade A scoring chance, but he was at least willing to shoot the puck when he had chances to, which was kind of another problem or reoccurring problem for the Kraken in those first 2 periods. As for the third star, I wasn't going to give out a third star until the last 10 minutes of this game happened, and in those last 10 minutes, there was clearly one player that was the best for the Kraken. I guess you could maybe say Grubauer could potentially argue for that as well, but the guy that was clearly the best, at least to me anyway, was Andrei Burakovsky with 2 beautiful passes that both lead to those goals for the Kraken. And I suppose if you want to, we could give an honorable mention to Grubauer since he did pitch a shutout in at least the last period, or the one period that he played in. So yeah, at least a little bit of positivity for a few players coming out of what was a very ugly game and something that we'd really like to see a lot less of and kind of got our fill of in the beginning of last season. With that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game. Again, probably not terribly positive, but what you guys thought of this one. And honestly, at this point, I think we're all just ready to move on to the next one. So if you made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoyed this video, much more than you probably did the game, let me know down there where there's buttons for that kind of stuff that I appreciate you using because they help to support the channel and all that stuff. And until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.